Hey, welcome to episode 32 of the AskJV show. Today I'm talking more about mixing in mono, what to do when the band doesn't have a bass player, punching in versus comping big takes, and how to stack different guitar tones and layers in your arrangement. Let's get into it.
3, 2, 1. This is the AskJV show.
Our first question comes from Michael. You have said quite a few times that it's a good idea to mix in mono. Every time I try this, my guitars basically disappear behind the vocals. I adjust them so it sounds balanced, but when I return to stereo, they're way too loud. What's going on? My mix sounds great in stereo, but I want it to sound okay in little mono phone speakers.
Hey Michael, yeah, this is true. When if you collapse your mix into mono, the stuff that's panned out wide, it will seem quieter. So like you said, you can just turn it up a little bit while you're mixing in mono to try and get the EQ right, and then when you flip it back to stereo, just put it back down to the right level. So when I talk about mixing in mono, there's a specific reason why I do it, and it's just for EQing. So again, I'll reiterate, I've said it before on the show, but when you put everything down in mono, it stacks all the elements on top of each other. You don't get the benefit of stereo separation. So it really forces you to see where frequencies are being masked and covered up and such, and find the right areas to cut and boost with your EQ. So I specifically use mono just for EQing like that. I don't really use it for setting the balance of anything at all. So yeah, I might have to adjust the levels of things just so I can hear it enough in mono, and then when I flip back to stereo, that's when I'm doing the actual balancing between tracks. So maybe that's just a new way to think of it. It's not mixing in mono just generally, it's EQing in mono specifically, what I use it for. So I hope that helps.
Our next question comes from Nick. Hey Jordan, I'm currently working with a band that doesn't have a bass guitarist. I'm not sure how I should approach working with the low end. What do you do when working on a mix that doesn't have any kind of bass track? Should I add a bass synth and treat it like a bass guitar?
Well, if I was strictly mixing the song, I would probably go back to the band and say, you need to give me a bass track of some sort. And if they say no, then I guess, I probably, unless they're going to pay me extra, I wouldn't go to the effort of putting in a synth track and everything. That would be an extra service for sure. If you're actually recording this band, then a good workaround is, to use a software instrument or a synth maybe. There's plugins like Trillion is one that I've used for program bass, and there's a bunch of others, but there's basically these instruments that are made from actually sampled bass guitar. So they've actually, sampled individual notes across bass guitar, multiple velocities, similar to drum samples, but it's for bass. And so the result is that you can actually program bass parts that sound very realistic. So if you're finding yourself doing this often, then it's probably worth investing in a plugin like that. So I know they can range in price. Trillion, like I said, is, it's a few $100s, I believe, but it's quite powerful. I've used it on some records. It sounds very realistic, and especially for low tuned stuff, it's very good because, often with a real bass, if you got it tuned down to, drop A or drop G or something, which I've had before, it's extremely hard to record that well and get the tuning right and capture that low end in a solid way. And so, using these MIDI instruments for bass can be very helpful in those cases. So check those out. Check out some software instruments for bass and see if any of them are a good fit for you.
This question comes from Jordan. When recording musicians, do you let them play multiple takes all the way through and comp tracks during editing? Or do you mostly punch in and fix the mistakes as you go? Or a combination of both?
It kind of depends on a few factors. I mean, the genre, the player themselves, and what instrument it is. So, but in general, I'll give you some guidelines of what I do. For drums, I do like to get big takes, from front to back if I can, or at least large sections of the song, and then comp those together. I just, it's obviously harder to punch in and out with drums because there's so much going on there. They have to really play it the same for the punch in to work. So it's good to do big takes and then comp them together. Find that's a good way to do it for drums. For everything else, I'm more so on the flip side. I'll fix, punch in and fix things as we're going along, so that by the time we get to the end, it's done. We don't have to do any more punch-ins for the most part. So that's my approach. There are some exceptions. I'd say for bass and guitar, I never do full takes in comp. It's definitely not the way I work. I think that's very inefficient. It's better to just split it into small chunks as you're going and get it right. And for vocals, that's my approach too. I might start out by doing some bigger takes, and then I'll start going through, splitting up where I deem necessary line by line with the vocalist and trying to get it right one part at a time and just moving on. I find if you're doing big long takes and comping, usually you have to go back and punch in anyway some spots, and it's just, you end up with a more disconnected vibe, and it's very time consuming to go and sift through 3, 4, 5 takes of vocals for every line and pick one. And you kind of get this mindset that you're limited, like, okay, we've got these 5 takes, I've got to pick one of them. So you might end up settling where you should just record it again. So I honestly, even for vocals, I'm way more just in the moment, feeling the vibe, and we're just recording. If we have to do the line 10 times, I'll do it 10 times. And then as soon as it feels right, then I say, we've got it, moving on, next line, and I just go with the feel like that. And I find that's the approach I like best. So hopefully that helps.
Our last question comes from Daniel. When it comes to recording/mixing a 2-guitar metal rock band, how do you choose guitar tones that complement each other in terms of EQing the amps? Should one guitar/amp have more low end and the other more mids or highs? And how do you EQ guitar solos to make them stand out in the mix?
Daniel, yeah, I'll try to simplify things for you. So when it comes to, this heavy rock metal stuff, for the rhythm guitars, so the left and right, even if there's 2 guitarists in the band, I don't care. I'm not thinking about it in terms of band members. I'm thinking about it in terms of, the production and the mix, right? So I want the main rhythm guitars that are going to be doubled and panned out to have essentially the same tone. So I'll use the exact same setup and chain for the 2 sides there. So it's just like one big solid tone in stereo. Then for layers and leads is where I switch up the amp. And I find that really helps. Like if you use the same amp for both the rhythms and the leads, it can be very hard for the leads to cut through the mix because you're just stacking the same frequencies on top of each other. But if you use a different amp, or you just switch up something in the chain, even just switching the guitar and leaving everything else the same, can give you enough of a difference in tone that it's going to really separate the solos and the leads from the rhythm guitar. So that's my approach, is to have the same tone on both sides and then switch up the amp for any leads and layers that you're doing. Thanks again to everyone who submitted questions for the show. If you've got something you're confused about or want to know more about, or just have a simple question you want answered by me on the show, head to AskJVPod.com to submit it there, and we'll try to get it onto the show in the future. If you're not on my email list already, head to hardcoremusicstudio.com, click for the free cheat sheet there. You'll be asked to put in your name and email, and that just gets you on our newsletter, and you'll know when there's ever new free content added, and also when my premium courses open up. So most of my courses, the mixing courses, they are only open a couple times a year for people to get in. So and that's actually going to be happening this month. In the next week or 2, I'm going to be opening up the hardcore mixing course again for the last time this year. So you definitely want to be on the email list to make sure that you get a chance to join the course, because it's usually a few months before I open it again. So definitely head over there, join the email list, get the cheat sheet. You'll get a bunch of free content as well, and you'll know about when that course is opening up. So stay tuned for that. Otherwise, just submit your questions if you want to get on the show. Love to hear your feedback either way, and we'll see you next time.